Over the past few months, I've released a few videos on why Synology is so far ahead of the competition right this second, but so far behind the competition at the same time. I'm not saying anything shocking, but it generally has to do with the fact that Synology DSM is the best pre-built NAS operating system you can use, with Synology devices being some of the worst pre-built hardware you can buy. Adding on that right now, this is probably the worst time that you can buy a new Synology device because you're buying the last generation of hardware, even though the new generation hasn't come out yet. It's simply old at this point, and if you're making an investment and can hold off, you should. My personal expectation as a Synology user, and not just someone who creates videos on them, was that Computex 2024 is when they were going to release some sort of home user NAS device, or at least some information on when they'll be coming. Computex came and went, and everything discussed or announced was on the enterprise side, which is frustrating for home users and kind of leaves us in a weird position. Robbie over at NAS Compares was there and had a great roundup on everything announced that I'll leave a link to in the description. Now, the DS1522 Plus was announced at the end of June 2022, so it's possible that an announcement is still right around the corner, but going based on Synology's other product announcements, later this year seems more likely. But to be clear, I have no idea. I have no information that you don't have. I am simply speculating. Many of you are starting to consider other NAS manufacturers, either for the hardware specs or just because you want something different. And I've given my input on that in the past, but I want to try and be a little more open-minded than I have been. I reviewed the UGreen DXP 4800 Plus, and like almost everyone else, said the hardware was incredible and the software was lacking. Where I deferred from a lot of other reviews was in my extreme dislike for a lot of the operating system functionality. And it just had to do with the fact that I ran into a lot of core problems, and purchasing a device with those core software problems isn't something I would do with my personal money. And I wasn't willing to suggest that you did either. I had SMB permission issues, my backups weren't working, there were tons of operating system bugs, and at the time, I wasn't going to sit up here and act like it was an absolute guarantee that things were going to get better. I was hopeful that they would, but wasn't willing to tell you to back products through Kickstarter in their current state unless you were willing to potentially run your own operating system on it. Over the past 2 months, the operating system has gotten a lot better. I turned it on a few days ago and there was some sort of permission update that I ran, and I kind of wish I took a screenshot of it, but I didn't. The point is, after some of these updates, the experience has gotten a lot better. And that's kind of what I want to show you right now. So the very first thing, which was a complete deal breaker to me, was that SMB permissions didn't work. And I'm happy to say that as of right now, they work. I don't know if it was the actual permission update that fixed it. I don't know what it is. But if I log into the device, what you'll see is I have access to all of the data on the NAS. This is the way it's supposed to be. You try to access it through SMB, you authenticate, you have access to the folders. Prior to this update, and I don't want to say it was this specific update because I haven't checked this in a while. I just saw that and it naturally made me, go through and try it on this side. But prior to this, as soon as I would try and access the NAS through SMB, it brought me directly here. So that wasn't working. The next thing I want to show you is actually backups. So backups are actually functioning the way that they're supposed to at this point. So inside of this backup and restore tool, if I select to back up this device then to a rsync server, and I'm just going to use my existing connection here, the actual source and destination settings weren't particularly working. I think I have screenshots in the review, but it wasn't doing a good job of letting me select the source data, and the destination data definitely didn't work. It would show a few of the folders here, and this is the folders on the destination. This is actually a Synology NAS, but it would show a few of the folders on the destination NAS, but it wouldn't show everything. And that was kind of driving me nuts because that's two of the huge portions of a NAS is accessing the data, making sure that users that don't have permission to the data don't see it, and then backing up the data. And that didn't work. So at this point, I'm confident in saying that it does work. And I can actually back up the source data to the destination without a problem. I was able to restore. Everything was functioning properly. So that's the backup and the restore. Unfortunately, as of right now, it doesn't appear like there's any actual snapshot feature. They really need to implement something like that. The volume does use BTRFS, so I know it's not that. It just would appear as if they haven't set it up right. They do have a version manager here, but quite honestly, I have absolutely no idea how this works. I imagine it is a feature similar to snapshots, but not snapshots. You really need snapshots for data security, so that doesn't function right now. Now, in terms of their enhancements, they have actually released 2 new apps since I had done my review on them. And their virtual machine application is functioning in my testing very well. So I set up a Home Assistant VM, and if I connect to it, it will actually configure a VNC session. And in a second here, I'm going to see my Home Assistant virtual machine that I configured, and there it is. So inside of here, I will navigate to this IP address, and what you'll see is I'm brought to the actual Home Assistant setup. So this is functioning as expected. So in terms of running virtual machines on this device, that appears to be working well. Now, I haven't tested a ton of different operating systems. I imagine, though, that it'll be fine, but take that disclaimer for what it is. The other one is Docker, and I had spun up a Docker container, a few Docker containers, a few of them I had deleted, but Docker appears to be functioning properly. I will say that right now there is not a Docker Compose feature, which is a little bit of a letdown. I kind of wish that there was, especially after using it in Synology Container Manager. It just makes managing your Docker containers so much easier. But this totally increases the functionality of this device. And you can set up tons and tons of different Docker containers. You can set up Nextcloud that will give you Synology Drive-like functionality. You can set up, there's a few different self-hosted photo applications. You can set up backup tools, sync tools. So, in terms of Docker, I was a little bit against in the review. I was a little against them releasing these new applications because I thought that they had to get the core functionality to work. And it appears as if they were able to kind of do that in parallel. Docker works as expected. Virtual machine works as expected. And some of those other problems that I had faced appear to be resolved. So I'm actually a lot more confident at this point in this OS than I was in the past. So the reason I'm showing you this is because none of these NAS operating systems are even close to Synology DSM. They're just not mature enough yet. But using UGreen as an example, if they were to implement some sort of snapshot tool with Docker, I can implement tools like Nextcloud for my desktop syncing, photo solutions, other backup tools, and have what you would call a functional NAS device that works extremely well for my individual use case. Doesn't mean it would work well for yours, but for mine, it would. As you know, I love Synology's first-party applications, but there are a lot of great alternatives with Docker being available, and it's a huge step in the right direction. Now, the final piece is security, which is entirely separate, and I'm not a security auditor and not going to pretend to be one. Security is a huge benefit in Synology DSM that I don't think a single pre-built NAS operating system manufacturer has figured out to the extent that Synology has. But security is something you should always keep in mind, and hopefully UGreen will produce some sort of white paper on their security practices and have a few independent security tests performed to instill confidence in its users. What I mainly wanted to show today is that it does appear that Synology is focusing more on enterprises at this point. And I'm sure they'll still focus on home users as well, but probably to a lesser extent moving forward than they have in the past. The good thing is there are other manufacturers that appear to be getting better, focusing solely on home users, which will hopefully push them all forward. If you made it this far, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.